Hey guys! Hey, this is going to be kind of an interesting video, so kind of a history twist to it. So I'm going to read from the history curriculum that we have through the Good and the Beautiful because it's so good and I would not be able to represent it as good as it is. So I'm just going to read it, and I feel like it's super important for every one of us who is citizens of the United States to understand how important it is for us to be really good stewards of our Constitution and the government. So I'm just going to start reading here. Founding Father James Madison warned against the dangers of a direct democracy, calling it the tyranny of the majority. A direct democracy does not have a system of checks and balances. In a direct democracy, the passions or impulses of the people could hurt minorities, or it could harm the rights of all people. In a constitution representative government, also called a constitutional republic, instead of voting directly about all decisions, people instead vote for people to represent them. The idea is that people should carefully choose their representatives, selecting men and women who have their same values and will follow the Constitution. These representatives can then take the time to really research and understand all the issues and go through a process of checks and balances so the rights of all people are protected. In a constitutional democratic republic, if the elected representatives do not work hard, or if they vote in ways that the people do not like, the people during the next elections are then able to choose someone else to represent them. That is why it is important that each government position is only temporary and has limited powers. The United States is a constitutional democratic republic. The government of the United States has proved to be the most successful form of the government in the history of the world in terms of protecting rights and freedoms and bringing about a higher standard of life. The United States government has been functioning for much longer than many governments in history. Unfortunately, when people and/or representatives do not follow the Constitution, it leads to tyranny. Citizens have an obligation to understand the Constitution, keep track of what their representatives are doing, and elect only people who will follow the Constitution. So I'm going to read that again because this is we the people's obligation, okay? Citizens have an obligation to understand the Constitution. We need to know for ourselves the Constitution, and let me add, we need to be teaching our children the Constitution. Keep track of what their representatives are doing and elect only people who will follow the Constitution. Okay? So important. Those are our obligations as citizens. That's how we are going to be good stewards of our Constitution and government. It's important to understand that it is not democracy that protects people from tyranny. For example, consider a country that is ruled by a dictator. The people can rise up and overthrow the dictator and elect a new leader. Some could say that the country demonstrated democratic rule because the people chose their new leader. However, just because a country allows votes, it doesn't mean it's a democracy. Worse, if the people fail to establish a constitution to protect their rights and do not demand that their leaders follow the rules, they will soon be ruled by another dictator. The key is following a constitution that protects God-given rights and limits the power of leaders. To illustrate what we have just learned, let's imagine that we have beans, and these beans represent the families in our neighborhood. Now, let's imagine that our neighborhood wants to build a community garden, and so they hold a meeting. First, let's imagine the neighborhood is run like a democracy in which the people vote and do what the majority chooses. So we are going to imagine placing one bean away from all the other beans. Let's say that every person in the neighborhood except Mr. Harris votes that Mr. Harris has to donate his house to the neighborhood, that his house should be torn down, and that the community garden should be made on his property. You can see that this would be wrong, even if the majority voted for it. Mr. Harris' rights and protections would be trampled just because he was in the minority. Now let's imagine that the neighborhood was run as a constitutional democracy. The people had formed a neighborhood constitution that protected the God-given rights to life, property, and so forth for each individual. The people then would not even be able to propose a vote that went against the Constitution, and Mr. Harris's property would be protected. A constitutional democratic republic is a government of elected representatives subject to following a constitution. Instead of voting on everything, citizens choose representatives. A constitutional democratic republic has proven to be one of the fairest and most successful forms of government. Nations with constitutional democratic republics tend to have more protections, freedoms, and a higher standard of living than other forms of government. Dictatorships. Okay, let's talk about dictatorships. A dictatorship is a government in which a single individual or group has total rule with no restrictions. Dictators take power by force or by misleading the people. Dictators are often unfair and cruel. Democracy. A democracy government is run by the people. All the powers of government, judicial, executive, and legislative, rest directly in the hands of the citizens. It is important to remember that the democracy is a different form from a constitutional democracy. Whatever the majority of the people vote for is what will be done, right or wrong. And a monarchy is a government that is ruled by a monarch, such as a king or a queen. Monarchs generally rule for life. Also, most monarchies are hereditary. When the monarch dies, a son, daughter, or other relative takes his or her place. Monarchies are now rare, but they used to be very common. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about our United States. Okay, we're going to talk about free and fair elections. The United States Constitutional Democratic Republic conducts elections in which all citizens are allowed to vote freely and fairly for people to represent them. Majority rule with individual rights. In the United States Constitutional Democratic Republic, majority and minority rights are balanced, and leaders are chosen to protect the God-given rights of each individual. Limitations. In the United States Constitutional Democratic Republic, the Constitution places limits on their leaders. Government leaders only have certain powers, and they also have limited terms, meaning they can only hold their position for a certain amount of time before elections are held again. In addition, each government function should be performed by the most local level of government that is capable of performing that function effectively. Citizen participation. A constitutional democratic republic only works if citizens participate. Let me just go over that again. A constitutional democratic republic only works if citizens participate. Citizens have an obligation, once again, to understand the Constitution. And I'm going to add, and teach our children to understand the Constitution, stay informed about issues, watch their representatives closely, contact representatives about important issues if needed, take the time and effort to research candidates, and vote. Religious and moral people. I love this one. Okay, really hone into this one. Founding Father John Adams said, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." So I'm going to read that last part again because it's so true and so important. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. That says it right there. It is so important that we are moral people, that we have high standards. And I heard Glenn Beck say that the whole world is watching us, the United States, because our government is what truly works. It brings freedom. It brings us together, and it protects. And when we don't do our part, and when we fail to have the morality and to recognize our Creator and His hand in all of this, our freedoms were given from the very beginning, before this earth was even created, did our Creator give us agency. And if we aren't good stewards of that agency and we don't do our part, we will continue to see our freedoms go away, and we will find ourselves in a terrible way with rulers that are more like dictators and tyrants than our beautiful constitutional democratic republic that we have. And I just urge all of us and encourage us to do our part, to teach our children the Constitution and help them understand it, and to really take seriously the representatives that are placed before us and know their moral character. I feel like that's so important, to know moral character of the representatives. Are they honest? Are they compassionate? Are they kind? Do they truly have the interests of we, the people? Do they have the interest of keeping to the Constitution? That's what I feel like we really need to be honing into. And let me just also add, when we are looking into the different candidates, I truly believe it's super important that we pray for guidance, that we pray to know who also it would be the best candidate for we, the people. I also wanted to share this awesome thing that The Good and the Beautiful created. So Jenny Phillips is the creator of the Good and Beautiful curriculum, and she created these fun history games, and they go along with the history curriculum. So I just wanted to share, because if you're thinking about homeschooling, seriously, think about The Good and the Beautiful. I totally recommend it. It's fun. It really goes over a lot of good things. This is my kids' favorite game, and this one. These are their two favorite games. And the other ones are fun too, but it's really a great way to get kids having fun with history. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is Jenny Phillips, The Good and the Beautiful's Constitution study. She did a full Constitution and government study for history, and we did this a couple of years ago, and we loved it. Jenny Phillips is an author, and she wrote this book about the mystery on Constitution Island, and we absolutely loved this book. So part of this curriculum was me reading to my kids certain chapters when it indicated in this curriculum to read the certain chapters of this book. Just wanted to share that with you guys. Thank you for coming by and listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.